Good day and welcome to Alena Media TV. We are broadcasting from Toronto, Canada. I am Elsa Abraham, and in this episode we are bringing you African news. Here is your headlines. Thousands of refugees missing in Tigray as Ethiopia shows no political will to reach agreement on GERD, Egypt's ambassador to Washington says. In our last story, Electoral Board cautions of party structure, its members to convene General Assembly to settle leadership split, Ethiopia election 2021. Let's go for a quick break. When we come back, we'll get our news in details. Welcome back from that short break. As many as 20,000 refugees have gone missing in the conflict in Tigray, Ethiopia. The head of UN Refugee Agency, the UNHCR, Filippo Grandi, has said many are feared to have been forcibly returned to Eritrea by the Eritrean troops from whom they had fled. Others might have fled to areas beyond the reach of any assistance. Continued fighting in Tigray has made access difficult to the UN and other agencies. As a result, confirmation of the reported massacre at Askum news on 15 January remains elusive. But a Belgian academic, Professor Jan Nissen of Ghent University, has received eyewitness reports that support earlier accounts. When Mr. Grandi visited Ethiopia earlier this week, he was granted access to a refugee camp in southern Tigray. He said that the situation in Tigray was extremely grave. Satellite images circulating on social media appear to show that 2 refugee camps have been destroyed. Mr. Grandi said that some of those who had escaped had resorted to eating leaves because they could find no other food. He called for an urgent investigation into widespread allegations of human rights abuses by all sides in the conflict. Ethiopian government troops, the Eritrean People's Liberation Front, and now Eritrean forces said to have crossed the border to pursue the TPLF. The shutdown of communications in Tigray since the start of the conflict last November means that reports of abuses emerge only from civilians who have been forced to flee the area. Professor Nissen has compiled a list of these reported abuses, many attributed to the Eritrean troops who have been supporting the Ethiopian government against the TPLF. His paper, The Situation in Tigray on the Beginning of 2021, includes reports of killings of civilians, children, and the priest. It also attributes the alleged massacre of up to 750 people in the church complex at Askum, which reputedly houses the Ark of the Covenant, to Eritrean troops. Mr. Nissen said that he had confirmed that a massacre had happened after phone calls to those who had escaped to Mekelle, the regional capital. Through short phone calls, people are afraid to speak on the phone with friends who came from Askum to Mekelle. The information that people get killed at Marian Tishon, the most important church of Ethiopian Christianity, is confirmed. People were separately engaged in collecting dead bodies from different areas and buried them hastily. A former member of the TPLF, Mulugeta Gebrehiton, has said that Tigray has been destroyed by the conflict. Speaking to Alex Dewal, executive director of the World Peace Federation and an expert on the Horn of Africa, Mr. Gebrehiwot described the situation in Tigray as genocide by decree and said that wherever the Ethiopian and Eritrean troops went, civilians were shot. They killed whomever they find in which village they get in. In the village I was in yesterday, a small village, they killed 21 people, out of which 7 of them were priests. UNICEF has issued an alert for the numbers of unaccompanied children who had fled the conflict and the high levels of malnutrition that they face. The lives of 70,000 children are at risk, it's estimated. The Secretary General of the Norwegian Refugee Council, the NRC, John Egeland, said that he had seen a humanitarian response so impeded. He said, 12 weeks since the fighting began, the basic elements of a response on the scale needed are still not in place. It is false to say that the aid is increasingly getting through. Aid has only gone to the places with little conflict and more limited needs, and is not keeping pace with the humanitarian crisis as it inevitably grows over time. The entire aid sector, NRC included, must also recognize our failure to define the scale of the crisis, to respond early, to coordinate, and to speak out, all of which has crippled the collective response. We must all act now and play our part to ensure aid reaches the millions of people suffering in Tigray. The Christian charity Mary's Meals, which has been working for years in the region, supporting more than 24,000 children by providing a meal in school, has launched an appeal to Tigray to get food to children wherever they are. The founder, Magnus McFarlane Barrow, said that Mekele had been overwhelmed by displaced people and unaccompanied children who had lost their parents. Moving on to our second story for the day, Ethiopia shows no political will to reach agreement on GERD. The ambassador said that the GERD has the potential to disrupt the lives of over 150 million Ethiopian and Sudanese citizens and will create an avalanche of socio-economic turbulence. Ethiopia shows no political will whatsoever to reach an agreement on the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, the GERD. Egyptian ambassador to Washington, Motez Zahran, was quoted on saying on Thursday. In a podcast interview with Our Monitor on Thursday, Ambassador Zahran said that there is no political will from Ethiopia to reach any kind of deal unless the international community comes together and supports the negotiations, which have reached a deadlock recently. We've never been opposed to development in Ethiopia. We need to be able to convince people that this, in fact, caters to development needs, but without any significant harm to the other two countries, he said. The ambassador said that the GERD has the potential to disrupt the lives of over 150 million Egyptian and Sudanese citizens and will create an avalanche of socio-economic turbulence. For every 1 billion cubic meters of water that is lost in unilateral operation of the dam, Egypt would lose 290,000 incomes, 130,000 hectares of cultivated land, he said, referring to the points raised by the Egyptian embassy virtual meeting with Congress aides in DC on Tuesday to discuss the GERD crisis. It is a matter of an existential nature for Egypt, he said, adding that Egypt held negotiations with Ethiopia and Sudan in order to reach a win-win situation. Unilateralism is not an option. A legally binding agreement with a dispute resolution mechanism has to be reached, and we certainly encourage the new administration to be fully engaged again, Zaran said. 2 weeks ago, the U.S. Secretary of State, Attorney Blinken, warned during his confirmation hearing that the GERD talks between Egypt, Ethiopia, and Sudan could boil over. Last year, the Trump administration brokered talks in Washington, D.C. between the three sides to break the years-long deadlock in negotiations, but failed to secure an Ethiopian signature on a draft agreement. In September, the U.S. suspended aid to Ethiopia as the Trump administration blamed the deadlock of the GERD negotiations on Addis Ababa's intransigence. Ethiopia announced last July the completion of the first filling of the dam and plans to finish the second filling this year, despite the absence of a legally binding agreement between the three parties. Sudan also recently refused to participate in further talks until experts from the African Union, which has brokered several rounds of negotiations between the three sides, are giving more opportunity to help bridge differences between the parties. Now, in our last story for today, Electoral Board cautions the OLF party structure its members to convene General Assembly to settle leadership split. In a statement it issued on Friday 4th, the National Electoral Board of Ethiopia, the NEBE, the NEBE, said its efforts so far to help settle internal split within the leadership of the opposition Oromo Liberation Front, the OLF, were to avail and ask the party to convene General Assembly aimed at reaching consensus to bridge the party's split. The NEBE said it is to be noted that its repeated efforts to settle the dispute was based on its mandate under its establishment proclamation number 1133/2019 and establishment of political parties and code of conduct proclamation number 1162/2019. The board reference a letter written on August 7, 2020, signed off by the deputy chairman of the party and submitted to the board by some of the OLF executive committee members, banning the chairman of the party and fielding successive complaints against the leadership. On the other hand, another letter signed off by the chairman of the party and submitted to the board on September 12, 2020, notified the board that the party had held a council assembly and banned the deputy chairman, members of the executive and central committees until the party held its general assembly. Cognizant of the board's role to settle internal party disputes based on its mandate stipulated under Proclamation 1162/2019 Act 74/6, the board said it has looked into the matter and decided to establish a committee mandated to look into the complaints from both sides. Accordingly, the NEBE said the party's faction led to the deputy chairman, Arauso Bikila, assigned a team to deal with the committee establishment by the board. However, the party's faction led by its chairman, Dawood Ibsa, was willing to assign a team on the grounds that the matter should be settled internally based on party code of conduct, leading to the failure the board's committee to settle the dispute. During this consultation, it was established that the OLF was experiencing leadership crisis and that it was not a position to provide leadership to its members. This failure has forced the board to take the matter on to its own and look into it instead through committee of professionals it has established, the NEBE said. Accordingly, the board said it has held extensive consultations with the leaders of both sides, as well as the board's members of discipline and control committee on the contents of the letter submitted by both. During this consultation, it was established that the OLF was experiencing leadership crisis and that it was not in position to provide leadership to its members. Especially, it was decided the decision taken by both sides to ban one another illegally. Therefore, the board has decided that the members banned by both sides should remain in their respective legal responsibilities. This is where we end today's episode on African News. Make sure you like, share, comment. Let us know your thoughts on this particular episode. Thanks for watching.